It's Primus Tracks with Josh and Frankie.
What a couple of dumb shits.
Hey Primates, Josh here. Hope you're enjoying the inter-album interviews. This one is a great one with Mike Dillon of Frog Brigade, Fungi Band, Fancy Band, and Primus for the Willy Wonka tour. You name it, he was there. This episode has a quirk to it in which Frankie and I had planned the time out, but the date fell in the 1 week of the year where Mexico is on daylight savings time and the United States is not. So Frankie joins the interview in progress, and we have a wonderful time regardless. Thanks again to Mike Dillon. Enjoy the show.
That's definitely why I like playing with Les. I mean, especially the way we do music. You know, I was fortunate to start playing with him about a couple years into his hiatus from Primus. I mean, they would still get together every now and then, but he was just sort of on, I don't know, we never really talked about it. It just seemed like that's what he was doing, into like jamming and just making all his weird solo music, which I absolutely love. But, you know, the thing about Les, when you play with him, he's such a great songwriter and composer naturally, that when he starts jams, it's like every one of his songs is just, his jams are just can be a song of gold. And I'm not saying that just to blow smoke in his ass.
Yeah.
It's just that's what he's really good at. I mean, there are a lot of guys that can play their instrument and sound really amazing. And you're like, how the hell are they playing that? But with Les, he plays it and you're like, wow, that's fucking amazing. That's like Jerry was a race car driver times 23. You know, it's like, it could be like another version of that or whatever, you know, it's just so musical. And he makes you play better when you play with him. When I started playing with him, I was sort of in the same, I'd been coming from like the punk funk, the world I came from with Billy Goat and all my shit. And I've been sort of in this, what they call the jam band world, which was really just the area where you landed up if you were in a Grateful Dead kind of band, which I wasn't, or you played instrumental music, or even music with singers, but the singers weren't any good. They just put you in jam band world, you know. And I was definitely in both, instrumental and singers that weren't any good.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, how'd you guys first cross paths?
I was in this band called Critters Buggin' with Matt Chamberlain, Skerrick, and Brad Hauser. That was the band that dragged me into the so-called jam band world from punk funk world or whatever it was I was in. But having been a jazz classical trained musician, I went to North Texas, a good music school down in Denton, where I met Matt Chamberlain and Brad Hauser.
Okay, yeah.
And Matt, we were in college bands together, and he got the gig with Edie Brickell, the New Bohemians, and then he went off and got Saturday Night Live. He did like a tour with Pearl Jam. He did all this stuff. And then he just sort of ended up in Seattle where he met Skerrick, and they started Critters Buggin'. Well, he called me up and he's like, hey, our percussionist left the band. You don't play percussion? I was like, sure. I'm getting sick of this punk funk shit. So I started playing with them. And then Skerrick, like in 99, I was like, yeah, man, I'm doing this Les Claypool and the Flying Frog Brigade thing. I was like, whoa, that's cool. I love Primus, because Billy Goat had opened for him.
Oh, yeah.
Back in the day, and saw Primus and Fishbone in 1990 or 91, whatever that tour was.
Oh, man.
We made that record and opened for Primus in 1990. And, so I was a huge fan of Les and Lair and Tim. So when I heard he was doing this sort of weird thing, I was like, just really intrigued. So I remember they were on tour, and somehow one of my bands, the Malachi Papers, got to open for Les and the Frog Brigade. I think it was in Cincinnati at Bogart's, and that would have been the summer of 2000. Yeah, I think it was summer of 2000. Yeah, okay, it was. Yeah. So yeah, we're talking 20 years ago. Yeah. Summer of 2000. We opened for them, and then after the show, I sat in with them I had my little vibraphone and some stuff and percussion. And I don't think Jay Lane was on that tour. I'm trying to remember who was on the Frog Brigade tour it was that summer. It very well might have been Jay. But anyway, I sat in with them, but had a blast. And then afterwards, Les talked to me. He's like, yeah, I got one of those. I got a xylophone out at Rancho Relaxo. And I was like, cool. So we just started talking about that. And I just felt, oh, yeah. But there was one time before that. Critters Buggin' played in San Francisco. like a month before that. Yeah, summer of 2000. And Les came down and sat in with us. So that
sweet.
same summer, we our paths crossed twice. And we had amazing jams. And then I was touring with Carl Denson in the Tiny Universe, playing percussion for Carl. And then Carl and Galactic were playing at the Warfield Theater, and the Frogs, and it was definitely Jay Lane that night. And Enor and Skerrick. I want to say Jeff Clemente was on keyboard still.
For sure.
They were ripping it up. So I got through with my set. I just hauled ass over there with my timbales, came in the side door of the Fillmore, and did like the last jam. Like I think it was Whammo or something with them. Nice. And we had a blast. And then a few days later, he called me up. He's like, "Hey, I'm making a record." And he called me up, and I went out and did the Purple Onion with him. And that was January of, was that right? Wow.
Yeah, that thing came out in 2002. So yeah, it must have been late 01.
Wait a second. Wait. So I'm off a year.
Okay.
Maybe I'm off a year. When did that come out? 2002?
Yeah.
Well, anyway, I remember it was when did 9/11 happen?
That'd be 2001.
That was 2001. Okay, so my bad. Yeah, it was right after. So yeah, fast forward. That's right. So I hung out with him the summer of 2001, crossed past 2000. We just sort of kept crossing paths. That's exactly what it was. First summer was 2000 Critters. Then 2001, that summer, I sat in with him, open for him with the Monty Papers at Bogart's. And then it was that we played the Warfield. And then January 2002, went out and recorded. He had been working on Purple Onion. Skerrick and I went and put a bunch of stuff on it. Yeah. And then that record came out in April, and I did my first tour, that first West Coast tour with the Frog Brigade. And for that tour, he had our man Fisher from Fishbone playing drums on that tour. And and then next thing I know, we're playing Bonnaroo, and then it just sort of like went that way from so from 2002 until 2010. I did a bunch of records with him. I did that. I did, what was the second solo record he did? Whales and Woe?
Whales and Woe, yeah.
Yep. Did that record with him a year or two later. And then he did a Fungi and Foe record.
Right.
And he got me to play on that. And I think that was the last solo record I did with him. Did he do any other solo records? I can't remember.
I don't think since then, no.
And we did that last tour. I remember we were in Santa Cruz, California. He was like, "Well, fellas, it's been awesome playing with you." We had been to Europe. We had been, we'd done the Rush Singer-Songwriter Hall of Fame. I got to meet Neil Peart.
Right. Yeah.
Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson. And of course, Les knew him, but growing up with Rush Band and Neil Peart being my God.
Oh, man.
And, we played Spirit of Radio.
Right.
And then we went and did one more West Coast tour after that tour. And then he was like, "All right, I'm going back to Primus." So he went back to Primus, and it was awesome because then the Dead Kenny G's that I was playing in, we opened the Go-Go Bordello Primus tour, that first tour they did with Jay, and we did the whole summer, and Jay would come out and sit in with us. And that was just absolutely an incredible summer. And then I remember, and then I started the Mike Dillon band, and I'm giving you a pretty good chronological order. Yeah. And then Les called me up. I think we did a New Year's Eve where maybe the Les band opened up for, the one version of the Frog Brigade opened up for Primus at the Fox Theater. And then a year later, he was like, "Hey, I got this idea of doing Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. And I want you to do Mallets." And I literally thought, I was like, wow, only Claypool would think of that. I went out there and did some recording, and then we did that that one New Year's Eve gig where Skerrick was on it.
Right. I was there that day.
And then instead of Skerrick being on the record, because Skerrick had a jazz tour come up, he got Sam Bass from the Wells of Woe band and the Fungi band. Yeah, the Fungi band to play cello on it. But then Sam can do the tour. So Sam, they got Teddy, and Teddy and I were the Fungi ensemble with Primus, and that was the end of 2014, fall of 2014, and around 2015, and it ended in September of 2015 in Los Angeles at the Orpheum Theater. And come on, Frankie, Help me out on that one.
Yeah. Oh, Frankie's not here yet. I'm not sure why.
Oh, wow. Well, cool. Well, I'm just telling you everything.
No,
And
it's
then
great.
that was an amazing year doing that tour with Les.
Yeah.
And watching them do their old school Primus set. And then we would do the psychedelic goodness of the Chocolate Factory. And
Right.
about a year after that, I remember he called me up. He's like, he'd always been like, then we started doing the Bastard Jazz thing.
Right.
So after that, we haven't recorded anything, but we've done about a Bastard Jazz gig once a year, and it's always a blast. We just show up and freak out and jam and do what I was talking to you about at the beginning of the interview, where Les just writes songs on the spot, and we all just like make this weird music. And yeah, I really love doing gigs where it's mostly improv, because you're in front of a crowd of people, especially with Les. Usually I do improv gigs and there's like 20 dudes there, or 30 maybe. And they're just like, they want it to be really weird. They want it to be so esoteric that no one's girlfriend would ever want to come. And, it's, there might be a few, but it's just really, and we like making it really out and really abstract. But when you do it with Les, it's the same principle. You're just improvising, making stuff up on the fly, except we're doing it in front of 1,000 people. And the one we did at Jazz Fest, what year was that? Summer of 2019. That was incredible. April 2019. That was an incredible gig. And then we did the Jam Cruise 2020. And I think that's when we all probably had the coronavirus. Didn't even know it. Everybody was sick.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that was January. And now they're saying it was going around. Who knows? But I don't know. I mean, the testing is so weird, and there's lots of false negatives, not very many false positives, but who knows?
Right.
Especially with the antibody testing. But I do have one friend, I'll leave him nameless, who's a musician, who actually, there aren't many false positives. He tested a false negative on the a negative on the antibodies, and then he tested positive on the antibodies. So, and I was in close proximity to him on the Jam Cruise and a tour later. So I think, who knows? It could have been jumping around. Yeah. Anyway, so that's sort of my time with Les. And, of course, along the way, you got to play with a lot of the people that he came up playing with.
Right.
Jay. Les always held Jay in sight, and still does, in such high regard.
Right.
A great drummer. And then, one of those, that summer that Bonnaroo, Tim did the tour. So, I mean, I was just like, oh my God. Because, Tim's like the man from he's one of the greatest drummers from my generation. Yeah. And it was, I love playing with Tim, and we have a great rapport.
And you've played some kit over the years. So.
Oh God, I forgot. I did like a couple of kit gigs with Les. Yeah. And it was so hilarious. One New Year's I did with him. It was just me, him, and Scarrick, and maybe for New Year's, one other person. But afterward, Les called me up. He's like, well, I'm firing you. You're back on marimba. And I was like, he's like, it's sort of like having a half a drummer and a half a marimba player. And your drum set playing sort of sucks, D. So I'm throwing you back on the old marimba. And I was sort of like relieved in a weird way. Yeah. But at the same time, man, for me, like learning, like I play a lot of drum sets still. Uh-huh. And the Les, man, I mean, he's such a great teacher too. He doesn't even know it, but he just tells you little things, little pointers, and it's funny, just like sonic things, all kinds of things like that over the years. He used to say, hey, put some duct tape on that vibraphone. No one's ever thought of doing that. Like, no one's going to put duct tape. That ain't a cymbal. This is like a $7,000 instrument. Yeah. Of course, Claypool would say, put some duct tape on it.
Let's see what happens.
What he's saying is, don't let it ring all the time. Let's have some staccato notes. Let's have some clarity. The way Les plays bass, you can hear everything. And, he'd always, when I played drum set, he's like, don't do any of that open hi-hat shit. That's the sign of a weak drummer.
He's talked about that a lot over the years. And he, even with, he was on some internet show that Lars Ulrich had, and he said that right to Lars's face, and you got to keep that shit closed. And Lars is just like, nah, let's talk about something else, which is hilarious.
Yeah, dude. I mean, that's some shit. He was like, I won't say what drummer he saw one time. He's like, they're good, but the damn drummer is doing too much open hi-hat.
Yeah. And he, you mentioned Jay, you mentioned Tim. So, you said it was there was some pressure in a weird way. I got to imagine, because you've played with those guys and you know that they're monsters in their own right, that, oh my gosh, you're kind of sitting on the throne and going, okay. I'd imagine.
Well, yeah, and most of it, like all the weird solo stuff, I could do really well. It was fun. And even I was getting pretty good at doing like the marimba part with my right hand and the snare and the kick drum and stuff with my left hand, because I had a little xylophone over the kick drum instead of tom. So I was doing this hybrid kit. And that's what I'm really interested in doing when I do drum set. When I have my vibes to the left. I'm playing vibes with my left hand, just kick and snare. And I've got my tabla and cymbals and shakers. And, I really want to do a hybrid, I like trying to do, no matter what I do as a musician, do my stuff in the middle, in the gray areas where it's just sort of like people scratch their head and go, from legit classical jazz world, they're like, what the hell is that guy doing standing on his vibraphone? Yeah. To like, have enough jazz chops where like the punk guys or whatever, like going, whoa, that guy's a jazzer. So, whatever. It's fun being sort of 1 foot in one world and 1 foot in the other world and coming up with your unique thing. Hence the term bastard. Yeah. One time Les and I were on the jam cruise and we're watching these guys rip it. He looked at me and goes, man, those guys are great. They're amazing. But you and I, we got them bastard chops, and just walked away.
Is that kind of where that idea for Bastard Jazz came from then? Just like that kind of talking?
Yeah, it's just sort of like, it's like, bastardizing things, Yeah. I think conceptually, that's why like I ended up playing with Les. I think it was just an energy thing that like, he's sort of that way with his world and I was that way with percussion world. And then the energy came together and I love playing with the dude. I send him texts, we're not working together all the time, but I drop him texts and just like the other day I was listening to fucking like, I don't know, like I listen to a lot of Frank Zappa on Amazon, I don't have a ton of this stuff like when I'm driving, and Beefheart. Like lately I've been listening to Beefheart and Zappa.
Oh, I'm a huge Beefheart fan.
I mean, Beefheart speaks to me more now than Zappa. I mean, of course, Zappa still does. When I was a kid, it was Zappa and Rush and King Crimson and all that prog shit and Genesis and fucking Yes and Band X and Alan Holdsworth and Mahavishnu, all that shit. So it's funny, just because I've been listening to a lot of Beefheart and some Zappa because I was doing a recording project for someone. They wanted me to do some Zappa stuff, a song off of Joe's Garage. Yeah. And luckily it was an easy Zappa song because I could figure it out. I didn't have to spend too much time. But it was none of them are easy. It was easier, put it that way.
Easy for a Zappa song, yeah.
Easy for a Zappa song. It was still a 9. So, but because of that, I guess the other day 2 days ago, I was driving to New Orleans and I was like getting up to Amazon Music. All of a sudden it was like, you're the soundtrack of your life. And I was like, oh, let's see what the fuck this is.
Oh, just some automated thing?
Well, yeah, this is on Amazon, because I got sick of doing iTunes. And I don't do Spotify, so I do Amazon. I'm an Amazon Prime member. And the soundtrack of my life, Mike Dillon. It was a picture of Frank Zappa. We have the soundtrack of your life, and it was Captain Frank Zappa. I'm like, well, hell, I better listen to it. There's Zappa. So I hit play, and the next thing you know, it's just like going through like this really interesting collection of music, like Zappa, and then it's going to King Crimson, then Beefheart, and all of a sudden 9 Inch Nails. Yeah, I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. I've really been in that record with Teeth, and so that makes sense why they popped that up. And then all of a sudden there's a Primus song, and I'm like, do they know that I'm friends with Les? Like, I don't know if I listened to any Primus on Amazon, but they put some Primus in there. And then all of a sudden there's some Ween. I'm like, do they know that I like Ween a lot? I'm crazy. So it was like nothing but prog and like 9 Inch Nails, Primus,
weird stuff,
and Ween. Nice. and the last record that Peter Gabriel did with Genesis, Lamb Laddie's Down on Broadway.
Oh, sure.
God, I haven't listened to that record in ages. And it was just blowing my mind. I was like, oh my God, listen how cool Genesis was when Gabriel was in the band still. I mean, I saw Genesis in high school. Of course, it was when Phil Collins was singing and Chester Thompson was playing drums. And it was fucking like, going to rock concerts when you're in high school. I mean, that's the best. Like smoking your first joint and going to a rock concert. There's nothing better.
Yeah.
It's all downhill from there, man. Forget about it.
Well, it's funny you say that because we're coming up on, in a couple of weeks here, not to date this, but in a couple of weeks here, I'm coming up on 25 years since my first rock show, and it was Primus in 95 on the Punch Bowl tour.
That's awesome. That's like Primus was like your Genesis. Or my first that was in a 3,000 seater where I saw Genesis. Or who knows? Maybe it was even worse. Maybe it wasn't Genesis. It was Phil Collins. Solo, but with the same great band, Tony Levin on bass.
Oh man,
or Pino and Chester Thompson, the Ringers. It was a great band. But I remember seeing Rush when I was a junior in high school. That was my first giant arena concert.
Nice,
man. 1984, the Signals tour, bro. Yes, it was just like it's still crazy to think about all those air drummers that were just doing the Neil Peart thing. I mean, literally, I'm like, whoa! Look at the first 20,000 rows of the concert. Everyone's doing the drum part.
Really? That's awesome.
It was astounding.
It sounds like then you had an opportunity to bond with Les over that too, as you guys got to know each other, with your similar musical interests. And I just hearing you talk about this, it really sounds like you guys were able to work together so well for so long. It just seems like you're kindred spirits in the sense that you got to keep creating. Because Les has said that before. You just got to keep creating, and you've been doing this for decades now. And I was looking at your discography, man. You haven't stopped. Like, when do you take a breath?
Well, luckily, I just really like doing it. It's like the best form of like psychiatric meds there are for me is writing music, and just it keeps me from getting too depressed in life. And so yeah, creating is just where it's at. I got I had a record come out this summer called Rosewood, which is I made in the past couple of years, and it came out like July. And then when the lockdown started, I recorded 30 songs already. Man. And the first group of 10 came out at the top of October, top of this month. And JP from Clutch plays drums on a song. I got my buddy Robbie Seahag, Robbie Mangano played guitar a lot. Robbie toured in that band, Sean Lennon's last band that opened for Primus. He was the guitar player in that band.
Oh, okay.
What is that? Ghost of a Saber-Toothed Tiger?
Yep.
It was just called Ghost, but then it became Ghost of a Saber-Toothed Tiger.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Robbie played in that band, and then Robbie sort of is also in a band with Dave Drywitz from Ween called Old Rugged Sauce. And I've been a fan of Robbie's, and Robbie's played in Project Object. And then he ended up playing in a lot of the Zappa alumni. They would get Robbie to come play in their bands because Robbie knows all the Zappa stuff. And then he knows the Beefheart shit. He's really been into the Beefheart stuff lately. Just like what I was talking about. Like Beefheart is just like, whoa, mind blowing. So I could call Robbie, I would get different drummers. Matt Chamberlain from Critters sent me a bunch of tracks, and that was awesome. I already said JP. I got my buddy Earl Harvin. Everyone's all around the world, but I was like recording stuff, and then I would send them the stuff, and then they put stuff on top, and then I would flesh it out, or maybe I would play drums on a tune, and just got probably 20 different musicians to do it with me. And it was just sort of started off as a fun project. Next thing I know, we released it on Bandcamp, and now the label's releasing it on vinyl in January. Nice. And then I did a total Leonard Cohen meets whatever the hell I do when I sing over Martin Denny record, which is all just vibes and percussion. And I'm singing, and I got a couple of my friends to sing backgrounds. And it's a really cool, just chilled out. Yeah, I can't wait for people to hear it. I've never done a record like that in my life. And I even did a Bob Wills song, Roly Poly. It's like my Tom Waits chilled record or whatever. I don't know. But so I did Roly Poly. I sang it like Tom Waits. Roly Poly, eating corn and taters. Did it real slow instead of they do it. Roly Poly, eating corn and taters.
That's a really good Tom Waits you got going there.
Yeah, well, when I sing, my voice is just so thrashed and screaming all the years. I don't even have to really try. I just got like, I sing like that. And so anyway,
Nice.
and I play marimba, so it works out good. I'm just like, well, fuck it. No one's done there's tons of guys with their guitars and their heartfelt songs, and I love it. I mean, I love singer-songwriters that just have the guts to play guitar and sing, whether it's Elliott Smith or Leonard Cohen or Ricky Lee Jones, who I play with, or Tom when he's just with his piano singing. I was like, all right, I'm going to try to do it.
Yeah.
I may suck. And that's the other thing. Like, I have no fear of sucking, because I've sucked so bad so many times that you got to not be afraid to suck.
Yeah. Let me ask you about that if you don't mind. And by the way, Frankie's here. So hi, Frankie.
Hi, Mike.
We've been talking for 35 minutes. I'm wired on coffee and chocolate, just talking shit.
Oh, he's killing it right now.
I'm glad you made it, Frankie.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, we were looking for you, yeah, because we needed some dates and places, and that's your thing, dude. By the way, I looked it up, Mike. You were talking about that Cincinnati gig in 2001. That was Paul Spina on drums.
Who was it?
Paul Spina, I guess is how you say his last name. I'm not sure, actually.
Wow.
Yeah, he was with that. He was with the band for a little while on tour.
Yeah, I remember that dude.
Okay.
Wow. Yeah.
I wanted, if you don't mind, can I ask you about that, like not being afraid to suck and that sort of thing? Because it's, I mean, for me and for a lot of people, I think there's performance anxiety, but I guess you probably have to get over sucking once or twice, and then it's not that bad. Or where did that idea come from for you?
I keep picking up new instruments or try to challenge myself artistically and not just do the same old thing that I know I can do. When I started playing the vibraphone in 1996 out again, although I had been playing hand percussion and timbales and, playing with great drummers, and I could always do that and go record for people playing congas or timbales or whatnot and do a competent job. Taking a vibraphone into somebody's setting was a whole new deal for me. I played it in college and in high school, but one day I just woke up and said, all right, I want to play this thing because I'm sick of playing those things, and no one is playing this thing right now. And I would go to jam sessions. I remember I was living in Kansas City back in the 90s, and I'd go these jam sessions at the 51st Street Coffee House. They'd be playing jazz standards, whether it's Horace Silver or whatever. And there's another vibraphone there. And then I would sit in, and I would just suck so bad. I would get lost in the tune, and I could tell other musicians thought, oh man, he's and at the time I was in that band Billy Goat. So, we had a bit of a following. People knew who I was, and I would go to these jazz jams and stink it up. But I was like, all right, I suck. I'm going to practice harder next week and be better the next time. You just got to know you're always going to get better. It's like a basketball player who takes a shot and his shots are off. You got to forget about that bad shot.
Yeah.
And then try to do better the next time. And always play with people better than you that make you get better. Mm-hmm. So just with the vibraphone, I still feel that way. Some nights I suck, but I just know I'm getting better for me, and I got things to work on. And yeah, you're going to suck some nights. Just no matter who you are, you're going to have nights where you're that fucking sucked. Oh, well, tomorrow I'll be better. You'll be depressed, and you'll be I can't stand the way I play. You'll have a good gig the next day. You'll be all right, I like myself again. So that's the cycle.
Okay. It's
not as dramatic as I just pointed it out, but it can be.
Well, I've sucked at things throughout the years, and this is not an endorsement, but alcohol helps right after, and then everything's better the next day.
Well, yeah, that was when I was still doing drugs and alcohol. That was exactly it took away the depression of sucking. It's stuck. Give me another beer, or whatever. Yeah. But yeah, I quit drinking. So it's I have to suck and then just sit with it. It's really so
okay.
Anyway.
So Frankie,
but for those of you that still drink, if you suck, just drink a lot more beer and you'll sound better.
That's great life advice. I think. I don't know.
We played a gig on the Mississippi River last night.
Yeah.
And it was beautiful. Just and Everyone's outside, socially distanced on the bank. They had this little stage set up. Not that many people. They that's 75 people in an area where they normally have like 500, but everyone's spread out. We're playing, having a great time. And all of a sudden, the organizers have said, by the way, there's free beer and wine up on the deck.
Oh, man.
So I announced it to them, and I'm like, all right, everyone, get drunk and then go jump in the river and take a swim. Of course, you don't want to swim in the Mississippi River in New Orleans.
No.
You'll die.
Yeah. Well, I grew up on the Mississippi in Iowa, and it's dirty up there, too.
Oh, it is?
Oh, man, it's browner than brown, man.
Some of that brown.
Yeah, not the good kind either. Oh, boy.
Yeah.
Several questions I would like to ask Mike. First of all, Mike, Josh and I spoke with Gabi Lala a few months ago, and she mentioned something really interesting. She said that when she was touring with you guys in the fancy band, she said it was unlike what you would expect from a tour, because instead of people partying or people hanging out, everybody was practicing on their instruments in order to be excellent for the following night. Do you have any recollection about practicing a lot for the concerts with the fancy band? Like, did Les Claypool have a really high standard for you guys during that tour?
Yeah, there's only one guy who didn't practice on that tour. It was Les. No, I'm joking. Yeah, with Gabi, she was always practicing in that sitar. See, you hear that? I got my tabla in my room all the time.
Yeah.
I still, getting back to sucking, I still take tabla lessons with a master from India. My teacher's Alok Dutta. He taught Danny Carey. He played on some Tool records. Nice. And he's really good friends with Danny. For me, I just been studying with Alok for 18 years now. It was on my first or second Claypool tour that I met Alok and started taking lessons with him. Just having a teacher and that sort of attitude. And when you had guys like Skerrick in the band, Gabi, and then the drummers were always practicing because, you're playing with Claypool. You want to play some shit. I mean, you want to sound good. So I would even take my vibraphone up to my room on off nights. And yeah, that was, I think you nailed it, Frankie. There was this always, and there wasn't a lot of partying. Gabi, yeah, and also what was nice about being around Gabi was having a very nice, articulate young woman on tour with you. It just made us guys be better humans and not be like fucking Vikings, like acting stupid.
So,
but it never was that way on a Les tour. Les, it was always just like a nice family vibe on his tours. People might drink a little wine. Some people like to smoke a little weed, but his tours have always been just fucking about the music,
She recalled that Filipino Ray was a particularly hard one to play. Was there any specific track that was difficult for you, Mike, or a little more challenging than the others?
Yeah, when I had the first tour, I remember doing Thelahun Genji, and I had to play the 7/8, the counter rhythm. I think Adrian played, or maybe Robert, one of the guitar players in King Crimson played. I played that against what Enor was playing, and at the time that was challenging. I would just say in general with Les, everything live, especially the soloing, he would just challenge you to not only do something different on your instrument, and then he would sonically challenge you to find a spot for your instrument to sit within the songs. Okay, like, all right, if we're doing a Primus song, say on one of those Frog Brigade or Fungi tours, I might have to be the guy who played Larry's part on the vibes, like say when we did Pachyderm on one of those last tours with the Fungi band, or after Enor left, a lot of times I would have to do the guitar on the xylophone, like Rumble of the Diesel was sort of I was trying to catch the and a lot of the stuff from Of Wells of Woe, a lot of that record was just me recording and hanging out with Les. He had started it, and then he was doing the guitar, and I did a lot of the percussion and the vibe stuff. And then Skerritt came down and threw his stuff on. But, you know, Les always challenged, like I said, he challenged you to find something that was badass and grooving and unique for the song. And I'm trying to think right now, like, I know there were a few songs that every night kicked my ass. That I'd be like, oh, no, I'm going to suck again. But some of that stuff off that last record was really crazy. What is that? The Fungi record? Which one?
Yeah.
I mean, there was some stuff that he played. I would just be like, all right, I got to try to think like Les. Like the way Les would play drums, and then he'd want me to sort of do some weird version on the percussion. Yeah, it was always challenging. But once he found the essence of what he was trying to communicate with when he was expressing himself with the song, then you could you'd have a better chance of getting it. Even just like on Long on the Tooth, you know, there's things that might sound deceptively simple out front. It's done in a specific style, and like maybe you need to have a real big flam here and a big flam there, you know, to get the feeling of what Les is going for when he's writing. Because like I was saying earlier was like, he knows exactly what he's doing when he's writing. And not only is Les a great player, but people often, I don't think he gets his credit due as a writer. You know, I think he's like the Tom Waits of the punk, funk, thrash generation. You know, I mean, he really writes and tells great stories. You know, we all know he's that guy, how great he is. So when you're playing with him, you want to play parts, at least I did, that either he came up with or I got to record a lot of stuff. It was always just trying to like get into the space where the creativity would happen naturally and it wasn't forced and some cool stuff would come out. And when I record with him, he's always good. I think that's his other strong point, and this is what bass players do in general. Great bass players make the band sound better. They're the bass. They're the foundation. So when you're recording with Les, he's at the studio, you know, he's engineering, he's producing, and he just gently knows how to be like, oh, that sucked. Oh, that's great. Awesome. But the way he does it, he gets what he wants, you know, and he'll be like, you can do better. Do another one. So, and right now I'm thinking about the way we just ripped out on the really Wonka record on some of those tunes. It was just like, I mean, you know, Candyman was like crazy. I was just like, how the hell is he going to take Who Can Make the Sunrise? You know,
right.
And then I walk in, it was like, dun, 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 dun. I'm like, Candyman says, I'm like, what the fuck am I supposed to play on this? You know, so yeah, it was challenging, and then all of a sudden it came to life. And you know, in a lot of ways, that Willy Wonka tour might have been the most challenging of all of it that I've ever done with him. In some ways, because conceptually it was so deep, and there were parts, and we were basically scoring the movie every night.
Yeah,
we were trying to stay true to the movie and being like a soundtrack, and then finding little moments, and I'm speaking only for myself, where, you know, you were lighting it up. Like my solo on Golden Ticket, that would be my first solo every night. And I'm just back there sort of doing my things, getting a little esoteric on Candyman. But when Golden Ticket came alive, I got the solo. It was just like, I would go nuts on the xylophone. Yeah. And then you get off the stage and, you know, Les is always like, yeah, that's pretty good. Maybe not, don't go so Sun Ra so quickly. You know, stay thematic. So it was very challenging in that respect of like being true to the soundtrack vision and the orchestral arrangements we had. Because, you know, Tim's playing on that was very orchestral. I mean, he had that giant, crazy. What was that drum set? I still can't believe they set that shit up.
That 360-degree monster, man. That was something.
It was incredible. And it was all very orchestral. And, you know, and like what we were talking about earlier, it sort of comes from that place of coming up with prog rock and coming up with like Neil Peart having the biggest drum set in the world and tubular bells behind you. And, you know, and of course, the Primus is going to go out and do a trip. They should have already done it, but then COVID canceled everything.
Right.
But I remember Les was calling me, "Hey man, you got any tubular bells?" I'm like, he didn't tell me what they were for, of course. And then when I read the press release, Farewell to the Kings. Oh, I know what song they need the tubular bells for. I can play it right now.
Yeah.
Dun, 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 dun. Yeah. And the men. Anyway, I can't sing Rush at all.
Oh, well,
I was
speaking
in
about
bad
Rush,
Rush cover bands in high school. We had butcher them, but
Yeah.
I was still in Rush cover bands.
so speaking of Rush, Mike, I was wondering what it was like for you to perform Spirit of Radio at the Rush induction into the Canadian Songwriters Hall of Fame 10 years ago. Like, was Les Claypool nervous? Were you nervous as well? What was
Les
the
wasn't
atmosphere
nervous,
like?
but he probably, we were all nervous. Come on. I mean,
Yeah.
you can see Getty and Neil and them out there. And Les's version of it, I thought was awesome because it was Les doing Rush, and it was weird. And that's one of my favorite things about Les. I personally can't stand when bands just try to do covers just like the original version. I don't need that in my life. Unless you're in high school or you're just a cover band, that's cool. But I like it when bands like do covers and do it weird. And we definitely did a weird version of Spirit of Radio. And that was very challenging. I remember running the song and some of the covers were the hardest thing to do for me, getting back to the Filipino Ray question, because oftentimes with Les's songs, I got to track them and learn them and know them from the start. And I wasn't trying, but when I was having to play like someone else's part that they did really amazing, and I just feel like a hack playing it, just like, all right, like on that tune, Paulo's timing was really good. And, some of those fills and the transitions, but I got to play the little bell part. But at the end of the day, when we performed it, we did it on that tour in Europe quite a bit, getting ready. But yeah, you got there like, all right, Rush is watching me play.
That's
my
weird.
childhood heroes. Like Les had toured with them a bunch, but yeah, I was up on stage literally shitting in my pants. And, then went and met him afterwards, and Neil Peart didn't look like he was too impressed.
Yeah.
But I have a feeling it's hard to impress Neil.
Right.
But I remember Getty telling Les it was great. And, Neil was just like a golden god backstage.
Yeah.
He was just like 7'8", like the tallest man I'd ever seen in my life, wearing an arm. I mean, he's not, but that's what he was like to me.
Yeah.
And Paulo literally started like shaking and quivering when he shook Neil's hands.
Wow.
Because it was like meeting Gandhi or something, or Jesus Christ. I don't know. It was intense. Neil was that guy for us. And then when he died years, prematurely.
Right.
Last year, was it last year or the year before?
It was last year, yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, it was a huge blow, but what an honor to get to be a part of that. And, I know those guys love Les and they love Primus, and they were big supporters for those guys. And, and Les pays tribute to them, because I think without Rush, none of it, it's just like Zappa. I know I wouldn't be where I am without these, especially for my instrument, xylophone and marimba and vibraphone. I mean, Neil Peart had classical percussion instruments, and I was in the youth symphony, and he was a guy doing cool stuff with it in rock and roll. And then of course Zappa had Ed Mann and Ruth and Underwood, and now I'm friends with Ed Mann, and he and I talk,
Nice.
and it's just so amazing to get to meet your heroes from your youth. And even to be in the same room with them. So that was amazing, Frankie. Good question. Thanks for asking.
That's so cool that you had really positive experiences meeting your heroes, because that's something that, first of all, a lot of people meet their heroes, they go catatonic. They don't know what to do. But for me, I've always appreciated the distance, because they don't know me and I don't actually know them. I know their output, but you at least, I would say, are on the same level as them, being an accomplished musician. So you do have some common ground. I mean, did you feel like that helped, or did you feel like a fan when you met guys like Neil?
Oh, I was a total fan when I met Neil. I mean, it was just, I didn't start gushing or anything, but it was I became a fan instantly. And that's the beauty of music. Like that's the way you keep from becoming a cynical musician. You can still find your moments and your humility and your humanity just to be a fan.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, because I play, and the other guy that I met with Les was another childhood hero, was of course Stuart Copeland.
Yeah.
And I left that part out of the summer of 2000, before Les sat in with Critters that summer. I was telling him about that, Frankie. Garage Latois with Scarrick and Charlie and Stanton opened for Oysterhead at the Sanger Theater here in New Orleans.
Oh, okay.
That was April of 2000. And that was like I think it was Oysterhead's first gig. Les came out and they were all there getting ready to go on stage, and we just had a ripping show. And we said hi to everyone, and I was just completely, even still, a fanboy of Les then, but Stuart Copeland, I'm like, oh my God, the Police. I mean, I love the Police. They were another one of my favorite bands. So
yeah,
Stuart was a little rusty that night. It was his first gig in like 15 years. So I watched him play, and I was just like, all right, that's cool. It wasn't like he sucked, but it was just like, I know enough about drumming and playing drums. I hadn't seen him play live before. I just seen him on videos and stuff. But it was still incredible to see Stuart Copeland, one of my heroes, playing drums in a band that I got to open for.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're just sitting on the side of the stage. And then later that summer, we're playing in Vegas, and all of a sudden, Stuart runs up and says, "Can I play percussion with you?" And once again, I was like, yeah, of course. It was incredible. He just ripped it up on timbales. And I was wearing a cowboy suit that night, and he told me I had a nice cowboy suit. And then the next time I ran in, we keep running into Stuart over the years, because Les and Stuart are friends.
Yeah.
So that's, he was always really nice, sometimes they remember you, sometimes they don't, because they're dealing with a lot of people.
Right.
But I'm going to jump forward to like the last time I ran into Stuart. It was that last show of the Wonka Factory in LA.
Yes. Yeah.
And that night for the encore, we had both Danny Carey and Stuart all playing percussion. I think we did a crazy version of Bastards.
Right.
Is that right, Frankie? We did a giant.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
That was the last song I did with that tour. And before the show, everyone's backstage. Stanley Clark's hanging out. It's a total LA scene. Les's manager, Brad, was like, "Hey, he goes, remember Mike?" And to Stuart, and Stuart's like, "Oh, hey, man." And then after the show was over, right before we're about to go on stage for the encore, after the regular set's over, Stuart Copeland, my hero, goes, "Hey, Mike, sorry I didn't recognize you before the show. I didn't recognize you without your mallets."
Oh.
And I was just like, "Thank you. I can go and hide in a hole for the rest of life." Stuart Copeland recognized me. Yeah. So that was just like my little like proud moment of, I didn't recognize you without your mallet. Stuart Copeland apologizing for not recognizing you before the show.
Right.
So that was like really nice of him to say that. And then we all ripped it up on Bastards. And
I was going to ask you about Stanley Clark, because, the encounter that you had with Stuart Copeland is absolutely amazing. But I'm also curious about what it was like for you performing with Stanley on stage.
Yeah, did he get on stage with us too that night?
He did.
Yeah, he played bass with one of Les Claypool's pachyderm bass guitars.
Did he play it on pachyderm?
Yeah, he played the pachyderm for Bastards. And
Jesus, man, I'm getting that old timer's disease. Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. He did. That was like another one of those moments. Like, I mean, that happens. That was just such a great thing of playing with Les. You'd be on stage playing, and then all of a sudden, some monster player like Stanley, or I remember Adrian Belew sat in with us.
Yeah.
On a Frog Brigade tour in Columbus, Ohio, and played Bela with us. Nice. It was just like, oh my God. Scarrick and I were both drooling. And, you're like, okay, Adrian Belew just played with us. That really just happened. Wow.
During the Fungi Band tour, Mike, there was an interlude at every show where you would perform a very extended drum solo and a percussion solo along with Paolo Baldi. And some of the recordings of those solos reach up to 20 minutes. But what is really amazing is that there's not one performance that is identical to the other from one night to the next one. And there's really fascinating back and forth going on between the two of you on stage while you're doing your solos. So I was wondering how much of that was rehearsed, how much was improvised, and how did you guys reach that level of cohesion and musical communication for your solos during that tour?
Yeah, wow, Frankie, another great question. Oh my gosh. Now you're making me remember all this stuff. I completely forgot about the 20-minute solo. Okay, put that in the category of another challenging thing, because while it was a drum solo, Les challenged us every night. He would just say something and be like, all right. He's like the great football coach or whatever. He's like, that was pretty good. Why don't y'all try this? Why don't you do that? And sometimes you'd be like, man, we just kicked ass and everyone loved it and clapped and blah, blah, blah. And he's just like, he pushed you to be better. He'd be like, Les is like that. He's not a sports guy at all, but he's one of the best fucking football coaches in the history of rock and roll. Except for a few little calls. I call them calls, but Paulo and I both studied tabla with the same tabla teacher, Lope Dutta. So there was a few tabla things, they're called T-highs, that we might do at the end of a solo. Yeah, just a lot of it was just improv and playing together for all those years. I remember when Deadweight opened that tour back in 2002, when Fish went from the playing with the Frog Brigade to playing with Justin Bieber. He left for the Justin Bieber gig right in the middle of the tour. And we got Steamy Dean to play drums. And Paulo was in the opening band, while Steamy Dean was incredible, who could play like Tommy Oliver's kind of crazy drum set part. Les's music also requires nuance. And talking about a drum solo, that guy Steamy Dean could do incredible drum solos. And he turned out to be great too. Like, Les just always finds these incredible drummers to play with him. And then I don't know what happened to Steamy Dean. He just never saw him again. Huh. So, you know about Steamy Dean?
I remember the name, but other than with Les, I don't know.
Dude, Steamy Dean smoked cigarettes all the time and was really skinny and could play the craziest heavy metal, double bass drum solos in your life. So but Paulo, that was when I first met Paulo. So I've known Paulo for a long time. And just over the years, when I would say, hey, Les, what about checking out Paulo on drums? And then finally, Les and Paulo started jamming. And when did Paulo start playing with us, Frankie?
He joined Les for some shows with the Fancy Band. He was in different configurations of the Fancy Band, but he also played a few shows with the Frog Brigade too.
Yeah. So, just over the years, you develop these rapport, like when Fisher, that first Frog Brigade tour I did, he was so powerful as a drummer that he would just keep pushing you higher and higher and higher for those 20-minute solos. And you would literally go, where can I go? And now you're making me remember just the physical aspect. I would train and jog just to be able to do Claypool shows, because he would go off to the side of the stage and watch us play drums until he decided to come out with he'd take a little breather and come out and then hit the whamola and go crazy with us. But yeah, I just say with Les, there was always just no matter what you do, have some concept behind it, make it very orchestral, build it, have some waves. And he would challenge us. And I just think over years of doing it, I would love to hear some of those solos myself. Paulo and I, with Les's direction, he just sort of got us to build these really fun, long drum solos.
Yeah, there's some really mind blowing recordings out there. It's really amazing music to listen to. And I was also wondering, Mike, if you have any particular memories of shooting the music videos for Red State Girl and for Boonville Stomp.
Red State Girl. Wait, that's Buzzards of Green Hill Topple part. All right, playing some music.
Nice.
For y'all. Red State, yeah, that was fun. Red State Girl, and then Boonville Stomp. That was another one of those
right.
where I left one of my Peter Engelhardt percussion scraper wire metal toys at the studio after a tour. And then the next thing I know, I come back and he's done a whole record based around that one instrument, just diving deep with it. So, when I was trying to answer your question about Filipino Ray, it was just like little things like that. Like you're trying to really get the essence of like some music that Les made with a percussion instrument, like, and the way he's approaching it as one of the world's best bass players. You got to somehow like capture his magic. And then what was your question about those two songs?
Oh, if you have any particular memories about shooting the music videos for those tracks.
Absolutely not. I really don't. I don't even know if I'm in them. Am I in them?
Yeah, there are quite a few close-ups of you with the mask while you're playing on them.
Yeah, so I remember I remember that pattern we recorded, and yeah, every night it was just great to be able to play tabla with Les, and then on Cheer Up Charlie, he had me do the tabla on that song on the Wonka thing. But yeah, I didn't even think I've seen those videos, and then I've heard of, every now and then I'll just like see some video from that time period, and I'll be like, wow, that's incredible. Like I shared it on one of my Facebook pages, one of those solos that you're talking about that Paulo and I did, and Les came out wearing the monkey mask and did the whamola and just threw the thing on the ground. And I was listening to this play, and I'm like, I don't even know if I can play that way anymore. It was like so physical, and like I'd have to like get a personal trainer to be ready to do that shit again.
I'm curious. We were talking Frog Brigade, we're talking Fancy and Fungi, and then the Wonka tour. So with all these different bands and lineup changes within them over the years, I'm curious if essentially playing the same instruments, which are legion, but did your role ever change? In the sense that you had to fill more space here, less space here, or that sort of thing.
Thanks, Josh. Good question. Within Les's bands, I always sort of was like sonically. I'm sort of once the guitar player dropped out of the band, I was you try to like fill that role as the guitar player. And when you had Skerrick in the band, Skerrick is one of the best soloists, like rock and roll sax soloists, because he's more like everyone's like looking for the guitar. Like, where's the fucking guitar? That's incredible. And when he was in the band, like the communication that Les and Skerrick had on stage was absolutely incredible. Those guys, and they had good banner. It was really amazing. I mean, I loved watching those two guys play every night. So, like, say when I first joined the Fancy Band, I was sort of behind a guitar player and not Fancy Band, Frog Brigade, a guitar player, Skerrick, and it was just the drummer and I. So back then it was, really just like I was the drummer, one of the percussionists, and I would do crazy solos. I just felt like I was a solo guy, but I did have my parts like Macalaster, Roof. We came up with. There were always parts, and that when you have parts and you're in the band, you just feel like you're in the band. So it was definitely a band in that sense that we got to be part of the creative. I got to play on the record, and I wasn't just a hired guy to come in and do something that the hot shot from LA recorded, and then you're like learning their parts, which is fun too. And I've done plenty of that. But with Les, he brought us in and he just sort of guided you through your parts. And I've already talked about that a little bit. So, I was like, as far as soloing with the Purple Onion tour, I felt like I was sort of like, I don't know. I didn't feel like there was a lot of pressure on me to solo. Like, there were so many of us, and it was just like, those sets were like 2 hours long. Of course there was pressure. You had to play your ass off. I mean, we're always trying to play our ass off. But then as the band got weirder and weirder, all of a sudden there wasn't a guitar player. Is that when Gabby got in the band, when we stopped having guitar?
Gabby joined for the C2V3 tour for the Big Apple in the Sky back in 2004. But yeah, she was also featured in the Purple Onion album for Designer. Yeah.
Yeah, she would come sit in, so she's part of the posse. But at some point, Wells and Woe, Kehoe played a lot of guitar. Brian Kehoe toured with us. So when there was always a guitar player in the band, I felt like my role was very similar. Like I was a percussionist, and I would sort of fill the area of like maybe where the keyboard player Jeff Clemente used to fill, or whatever. Now I'm remembering that we used to do "Shine On Crazy Diamonds," and that song was always a bit of a challenge for me because there was amazing keyboard parts on the Floyd version, and then Jeff Clemente did great stuff on the live Frogs, and same thing with Dela. I don't know if it was on live Frogs, but those cool covers that he had been doing, I had to like sort of take on the keyboard role. And then once Gabby got in the band, she and I would just sort of, we just, you'd always just try to cover the parts. Les would be like, oh, why don't you do that part? And then we'd toss it around. And then, but when Gabby was in the band, there was still Skerrick in the band. And Skerrick was he was like our lead guitar player. We had like, just a great lead guitar player.
Yeah.
And then when Skerrick left the band, I definitely felt like, all right, it's just we don't have Skerrick in the fancy band anymore. And then it was like the Fungi band with Sam and Paulo and myself.
Yeah.
And I think in some ways that might have been like one of the most unique sounding weird projects for people that like Les's esoteric weird side. I mean, that band really got spectacular. But when we started rehearsing, there was a lot of space to fill. And
right. So actually the absence of guitar brings me to my next question, which actually has a little backstory. The first time that I saw you play, Mike, was when I popped in the DVD of 5 Gallons of Diesel for the first time. And that DVD has some footage from Bonnaroo 2002 with the Frog Brigade.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, there are just a couple of tracks on the DVD. So I was really starving for more footage. So I went on to look for more videos, and I discovered that there was another professional recording of Tela Hongingit from that concert.
Yeah,
and it's really amazing. Every time I meet a person who has never heard Les Claypool or Primus before, there are some go-to videos or some go-to songs that I reference. And if people are able to, to get into his music after that first impression, and then they ask me for more, then Tela Hongingit from Bonnaroo is the next video that I show them. And every single person I've shown that video to has the same reaction when you start playing the marimba. They just can't believe it. And it's really fun for me to see people so surprised, because it makes me remember how surprised I was myself when I watched that video for the first time. And, how incredibly fast you are playing the instrument on stage, but it's perfectly in tune with everything else that is happening with the song. So your performances of Tela Hongingit with the Frog Brigade were absolutely stellar. But then what is really amazing is that, as you said, the band lineups started changing radically from one project to the next until we arrived to Fungi and Foe, where there is no guitar player at all. Gabby isn't there either, so there's a ton of space to fill. And, when I discovered that Tela Hongingit had been performed on that tour, I said, oh my God, I have to listen to this. Like, who's going to perform the guitar part, the opening riff of the track? And then when I clicked play on the recording and I heard how you were doing the guitar riff note by note with the percussion, I just couldn't believe it. It was absolutely perfect. It was instantly recognizable. I mean, it's the main riff of Telachon Gingit, but it's Mike Dillon doing that on percussion. And it's really amazing, how much weight Les Claypool actually put on your shoulders by asking you to do that on stage. It's absolutely insane, but you pulled it off completely. And it's really spectacular to listen to it. It's a completely different version of the song, but it's Telachon Gingit. I mean, you can recognize it right away. So I was wondering, how hard was it to actually nail that down?
Yeah, that you're nailing it. When you asked me the Filipino Ray comparison between Gabby and myself, that's why I said Thala playing those parts and trying to play. I always just sort of was like, oh, I hope I'm. It was a challenge every night doing that Thala thing. That was definitely probably on a technical level one of the hardest things, but that's the good thing about music in general. When you play with guys, that's what you want as a musician. You want to be in a situation where someone like Les asks a guy like me to do something that's maybe outside of my skill set. I'm like, okay, I'm going to try to make this marimba, or I played on marimba or vibraphone, but one of those instruments, I'm going to have to try to sound like one of the greatest guitar players on the planet Earth and pull it off convincingly. And at the same time, it wasn't as it became its own thing. It represented the song well. We pulled it off, and it sounded like a cool cover. It didn't sound like some guy trying to sound like Adrian Belew or Robert Fripp on their guitar. So thank you for liking it. I was always sort of terrified, I think, every night.
Kind of jump ahead. We're kind of jumping around in the chronology now with some specifics. But you talked a bit about the Wonka tour already, but you're used to playing pretty long sets and late into the night, I imagine. But you're only on stage on the Wonka tour for a set and an encore. So how are you feeling your time on that tour? And it was pretty extensive. And while you're waiting around in the first set, maybe watching the band here and there, and then just in general, how was it playing on stage? We didn't really talk about this with Primus too.
Yeah, it was great. Like, Tim is such a solid rock. At that point, I've been playing with Les for 13 years. Off and on. Well, actually, off and on for like 14, 15 years. You're playing with your friends. You're playing with a band it's a great band. You're just up there having fun. You're tossing the ball around, seeing Larry's face when we had these little, you see these little things when you're on the stage and you're playing. Like, I really like connecting with Larry. He and I had a great time. He's a Zappa head. I'm a Zappa head.
Yeah.
I text with Larry still all the time. Not all the time, but I like to say hello. And if I lived in LA, I'd be like going over his house with a hard drive and saying, hey, can you play some guitar on this? And like, that's what I'd be doing. I need to do that through the internet. We've talked about it. I'm going to make it happen. But, they're your friends, but you also got a lot of respect for them. And, it was like I said, it was a very orchestral thing. You were scoring a movie. It was Les's scoring of the movie. And there was not as much improvisation in it as there was in previous bands where you're playing 2-hour sets. I mean, When we first started the thing with Les, we were literally, one night we did 3 hours straight on the Jam Cruise or something. It was literally insane till like 5 a.m.
Oh, man.
And I don't even know how you do it. We do like 10 songs and we play 10 songs for 3 hours. Talking about solos, like look that up, like the Jam Cruise, the one that Jimmy Herring played Maggot.
Yeah, I got a recording of that one. It's absolutely insane. And as you mentioned,
it's the longest gig of my life, man.
Yeah, it's 10 tracks. It's 10 tracks only, but some of them are actually 30 minutes long.
Wow.
Yeah. Brian Kehoe was on guitar. Scarrett. Who was playing drums on that?
So there are 2 Jam Cruise shows. There's one from 2006 that has Gabby Lala, Skerrick, you, and Jay Lane. And that one, that's the one that I'm talking about. I mean, it has a 30-minute version of Highball with the Devil. It's got a 25-minute version of Phantom Patriot. It's got like a 30-minute version of Precipitation.
Wow.
So that's a pretty long one. And then there's another Jam Cruise from 2009 with the Fungi Band, which is also quite extensive.
Have you heard the Jam Cruise from like 2000? It's either 2005 or 6 with Les. Look for that one. That's the one with Kehoe. That's the Of Wells and Woe band. We played Maggot Brain. And Les bought all these sailor suits, and we dressed up like sailors.
Yeah, got it. That was 2004. It's got Les Claypool, Brian Kehoe, Skerrick, you, Mike, and Paolo Baldi. There's a performance of Maggot Brain before David McAllister second, which closed the set. Nice. Yeah, I mean, it's just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, there are 9 songs in the set list.
Yeah, Jimmy Herring from Widespread Panic played guitar on that Maggot Brain with us. Mm-hmm.
That must have been a lot of fun.
I mean, Jimmy's such a great guitar player.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, when he was with Colonel Bruce, and I was a fan of him. So that was another one of those situations like, wow, I'm getting to play with this awesome musician. And that's probably the best thing about the whole jam band community was you meet a lot of friends, a lot of great musicians, and you're hanging out and you're playing with friends and trading ideas with people.
Yeah.
But yeah, so back to the Primus tour. We had a lot of time off. Not time off, but first set, you'd just be doing what Gabby talked about. I'd be in the dressing room playing tabla, loosening up, getting ready, staying really focused, because to do that show, you had to have lots of concentration. I'd go out, and when Les started the show with Tweakers, whenever he started with Tweakers, I just love it when the way they start Tweakers, or when he starts with American Life, just the bass part. Yeah. That's the one that don't. Yeah, I mean, so iconic and so great. And then, I don't know. I mean, I was a fan of Primus long before I even played with him. So I always liked their music. Jerry had, Big Brown Beaver, all those songs. So I had a good time being on that tour. I was like, wow, this is great. I get to watch them play some of my favorite songs, and I'm getting paid to be on tour. A lot of good food and getting fat. This is great. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad that Josh brought up the Chocolate Factory tour, Mike, because there's also something that I want to ask you about that tour in particular. The last year, I met someone who also played with Les Claypool, and he told me that when you're doing a side project with Les, he tends to be loose and he tends to be very relaxed. But when he's doing Primus, he's in a different headspace and the atmosphere is completely different. To put it into other words, he said that, Les Claypool shows are kind of special musical events, while Primus shows are rock events. They are like rock shows. Did you get that vibe that being on the road with Primus was completely different to being with Les with a side project?
Nah, not really. I mean, he's been doing Primus for so long, and they got that shit so dialed in that, like, I remember there would be times when we were like learning the new record. Yeah, it was like Les was having to practice that stuff too, that he like the solo stuff, or like we were doing these De La Hungenji like he brought up. It's funny, like Les started carrying like the old that banjo bass, not the banjo bass, the Drobo bass.
Yeah.
Keeping that on the bus, and man, the dude would just sit around and sort of just play bass. Everyone would just sort of like warm up and do what you do when you're on tour and get ready for it, no matter what tour. So it seems like before the show, he's warming up, doing his same thing as when he's doing, on that tour, they're sitting in the back watching an old weird movie and playing bass and just being Les, But yeah, Primus is a different thing. I mean, it's Primus. It's different than like the way they roll with the Delirium. I saw a few shows, but yeah, I don't know. That's hard. I don't have the answer for that question. My view would be like the thing I saw more importantly was, yeah, they have bigger production on Primus, bigger crew, a couple of tour buses, and a semi pulling all the gear. That was the big difference. You're playing bigger venues, but yeah, it just seems like Les is always just like sort of funny and having a good time and making everyone laugh all the time. And I mean, I don't know. I love being on tour with Les. It was, no matter what configuration, he's definitely one of the funniest dudes I've ever met. And
yeah.
That's something that I think we all know with like the song material he has. And the banter he does in between stage. He's just a natural at all that shit.
Yeah.
But, he's intense. When it's showtime, it's intense. Here we go.
Well, this one might be kind of a long shot, Mike, but there's a very rare Frog Brigade song that is called Ancient Mariner. It never made it past the sound checks, but it's a fully formed track. It's an instrumental, and it features you on percussion. And I was wondering if you have any recollection about that song. It was actually rehearsed by you guys a few times in 2003.
This is like Frankie's white whale of a track.
Yeah.
Jesus, Frankie. Wow. I have no recollection of that. Ancient Mariner. And it was rehearsed at Soundcheck. But
Yeah.
we never performed it live.
No, it never made it to an actual set list, but it's a really amazing instrumental.
Did he record it and release it anywhere?
It's never been released, and so far, Josh and I have not been able to find out if it was recorded at the studio. Oh, it's annotated at Toasterland, which is like a compendium of set lists for every Primus and Claypool show. And at first, I thought there was no recording of it, but then Toaster very kindly sent me one of these rehearsals, and I was able to hear it for myself. And it's like a 6-minute instrumental, and it changes tempo quite frequently. And on the notes, he only stipulated that it was written by Les Claypool and Brian Kehoe. But there's no further information about it other than that. And we have no idea why it never made it to the actual set list, because it's a fully formed song.
All right, I'm going to talk to Kehoe about it and see if I can get back to you. Wow.
Oh, that would be pretty great.
I do know that on that tour, sometimes there were weird songs that Kehoe did. I know there were some songs of Kehoe's that he liked that we rehearsed, or some stuff that they had done together that we never performed. But now I wonder if that's one of those songs. That's the only thing I can think.
Okay. Well, yeah. Frankie, you stumped the guest. Good job.
Wow. Good job, Frankie.
Well, the last thing I've got, Mike, is you said you love touring with Les, and I love that you toured with him too. Mostly because every time you come through my area on your own or with your bands, you guys go on at like 9 or 10, and I have to work the next morning, so I can't go to the show. So
right.
I appreciate it.
Earlier shows. Where do you live, Josh?
Sorry, I am in Southern Oregon, and I'm particularly referencing the Talent Club.
Talent Club. We need to start earlier there. I'm telling these people, but I try to tell people, man, I'm in my 50s now. Everybody wants to go to sleep earlier.
Yeah.
Do earlier shows.
Yeah. If you guys are going out at 7 or 8, I'm ready. But like, I'll message them and I'll like, what time's Mike going on? And they go 9, 9:30. I'm like, oh, gee whiz. You know?
How'd you do with the fires, Josh?
Oh, yeah. I was going to let you know the Talent Club's still standing, and I'm out closer to Jacksonville where you've played before with Les.
Yep.
The Brit Pavilion. So I'm out that way. So the fires didn't get to me.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
I just got a couple more questions for you, Mike, if that's okay with you.
Yeah.
One of the questions is about life on the road. It was really cool to hear Les Claypool say that for a long time he would go out on the road and Cheney wouldn't join him for every single show because she had to look after the kids. But they made an agreement that once they were off to college, she would join Les for every single tour that he did. And she was actually there for every show of the tours. And the last year when I met you in person, Mike, I also had the joy of meeting Peregrine, who is such a lovely person. She saved a spot for me for the concert. And I was wondering if you guys have something similar going on. Like, does she go on tour with you and attend every single show?
Well, there at the beginning of my relationship with Peregrine, she came out to a lot. And if it makes sense, yes. But, she has a business in Kansas City and she has her art career. So sometimes that prohibits her from coming out to all of my shows. But the plan is right now to like sort of be able to somehow be able to do it as cool as Les and Cheney do it, I would say for sure. Like it's just great being able to tour with your your better half and have them around, especially Peregrine. She and I collaborate on a lot of art, a lot of music, and she has all these killer merch ideas. And her being a visual artist, her eyeballs are way better. I have the good ears, she has the good eyeballs. So, and she's also a great writer. So we've been collaborating on lyrics as well for my Shoot the Moon that just came out on Bandcamp, and then Mike Dillon and the Bad Decisions, which will be coming out next month on Bandcamp, and then both of them will be vinyl releases on Royal Potato in January. I was telling Josh about that earlier, that we got a lot of music recorded.
Oh, cool. You guys have a pretty amazing team going on.
Yeah, I got an Airstream, and whenever she can, she comes out. But, man, she's got so much stuff going on in her own career and her own art that she can't come out all the time. But if I could have, like, a giant studio pulled behind a tour bus, and then she could just be painting in there and doing her stuff, I'd get her out more.
What was it like for you guys being on the last Jam Cruise this year?
That was sort of like life before life changed. You didn't realize like how good everything really was, because you're sort of busy all the time. I remember I got really sick right before New Year's Eve, and that sickness sort of lasted for like 2 weeks. So when I got on Jam Cruise, I was just starting to get over whatever it was. I was on Jam Cruise to do that one gig to play with Bastard Jazz, and it was great. That was the last time I saw Les. And we had a really fun night. And then they all left. We played till like 5 a.m. and then they flew out the next day, he and Sean Lynn. But I've done the Jam Cruise like every year. So we're not going to have a Jam Cruise this year because of COVID. And it's just like everything else. All of a sudden, when you don't have the gigs that you maybe took for granted, you're like wishing that you appreciated them maybe a little more. I mean, most everyone I know that does the Jam Cruise, myself included, because I've missed one, you end up sort of missing like, I didn't get to see all my friends, because the Jam Cruise, besides playing all the time and sitting in with your pals, you get to see a lot of musicians that they're out there doing the circuit too. And I think the only thing we won't miss of the Jam Cruise is the really bad food that's on the Jam Cruise. Like Mexico City, y'all have great food there, Frankie. Oh my God. And great art. I love Mexico City. I go there. My plan was to, I have a set of vibes there at Todd Clauser's house. I was going to record a record there this year with those guys and come back. And, I was going to go back twice. I was going to be there in May. He had some cool stuff lined up that he was calling me about. And then all of a sudden everything got canceled. So I hope to get back to Mexico City soon. Another thing that got canceled, I know my phone's going to die pretty soon, but I want to talk about this because Josh brought it up. But it's like, the last tour I did, Mike Dillon tour, ended right before COVID. And one of the tours for a long weekend, I had John Paul Gasser from Clutch playing drums for me.
Yeah.
And he's on my new record, Shoot the Moon. But that was his last tour. They were getting ready to go out. I was going to get to go and do some dates with Clutch in Europe playing for them, because whenever they had a festival, they were going to bring me to play, and then I was going to do when I'm around and I can play with them. It makes sense. They'll do like the Clutch set, and then they'll do like 30 minutes with me doing like all the songs that I've recorded with them, and then some of their more like DC Sound Attack, their go-go songs. So
yeah,
it's really like grown over the years, and that's just another thing. Like you're on tour, and I met the Clutch guys sort of through, I would say, Pepper Keenan from Corrosion and Conformity, and down. I would play his club in New Orleans, and I like the Go-Go and the Bad Brains, and Clutch. It also, I love Clutch. They're a very unique band. Yeah. They just like when you're on tour with them, they practice all the, they're always practicing, especially JP, and he toured with the Mike Dillon band back in right before COVID shut everything down. One of his last tours was with us.
Okay.
And we also did this cool record called Spy Machines that JP played drums and he produced the record. So that's a cool record to check out.
Yeah. Hopefully we get to see you guys live sometime in some form.
I love playing with Clutch. It's grown, the last few, when we opened for them the last time, they would do 45 minutes of their set, and they just bring me up, and we ended up doing 30 minutes, do the last half hour with them, and just really dig in. It was fun.
That's great.
It was fun to play on their record too. I really enjoyed that.
So I wanted to ask you a question, Mike, about a very specific song. It's Sir George Martin from the Fungi and Full record, because you have a marimba solo on that track. And I was wondering if, Les Claypool told you to listen to all the songs and then pick one that you think would benefit from a solo, or if he approached you directly with that song in mind and asked you to play a solo on that one. I was wondering what was the thought process behind a marimba solo on that track, which, by the way, is pretty great.
Yeah, I love that record. And that song in particular is just it's so great. It was sort of the running joke because the tour manager we had at the time, I forget who it was, probably was Brad, but Brad wasn't a huge fan of Sir George Martin. And we, Sir George Martin, I think that's, but I think maybe Brad thought it was a little too weird or something. But yeah, that whole record, let me think what songs I played solos on, but it was just one of those things where I had a day or two to go up to Rancho Relax. Does he still call it Rancho Relaxo?
Oh, yeah.
I had a couple of days. I had ended a Mike D tour and went up or something. I don't know. I just went up there and played on some songs. I wasn't maybe involved in that record as much as Wells and Woe and Purple Onion. But still, he gave me a lot of solos, and he would just sort of play through them and listen and go, hey, how about something there? And it was always his ideas. It was never like, hey, I think I should do something there. You just sort of hang out and we listen to the tunes and you'd be like, try something there. Sometimes he would say things like that and you'd be like, all right. And then it would be gold. That's what an artist does. They're able to see things maybe you don't see just yet.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great point.
Yeah. Les is good at that.
Yeah. Mike, I got to thank you so much for giving us so much of your time. I really appreciate it.
Hey,
Mike, thank you so much.
I will, I look forward to hearing y'all. I like talking about these old days because I don't reminisce about them all the time, but when I do talk about them, and especially there's been more podcast action happening during COVID.
Yeah.
It's been really nice to catch up and talk about these things. So thank you for having me. It was very nice talking to you both.
Thank you, Mike.
Stay in touch. All right. Bye-bye.
Awesome.